Good morning and welcome to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. While various products may be discussed during the course of this program, please note that these discussions are intended only to educate you about financial topics. They are broad in scope and do not consider your individual personal financial situation. You should work with a qualified financial professional in collaboration with your attorney and tax advisor before implementing any financial decisions which will affect your personal financial situation. Thrivent financial representatives cannot provide legal or tax advice. Your local Thrivent representatives are Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731. And now, Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
And welcome everyone to another edition of Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. And a beautiful day, a couple of cool days, but a warm weekend on tap, and a lunar eclipse this morning as well.
Yeah, I did. I got to see a little bit of that lunar eclipse, and gosh, I thought to myself, now what might this mean for the financial markets?
Oh,
no, just kidding.
Really, you're going that far, huh?
No, not at all.
Lunar eclipse and the solar and
well,
the.
They try and track every darn thing from who wins the Super Bowl to the length of women's skirts. I mean, seriously, it's just wild, the things that are supposed to have some impact on the market.
Some indicators to the market, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, luckily, the market's closed today.
Right, right. Yeah, but you know what? There's the carryover effect, just
True.
like the Super Bowl.
True.
So we have to make fun of those things because obviously the fundamentals are what we really focus on.
Yeah, exactly. We're not talking about those wild outliers, stuff like that. We're talking about trying to keep you safe and in trying to get you some good singles, doubles, and every once in a while a home run.
You got it. That's
Strategies,
exactly right.
yes.
That's a good way to put it, frankly.
And speaking of those markets, since we're on the topic, Scott, it's financial strategies. Let's talk a little bit about the markets. Another not quite a huge roller coaster week, but still the ups and downs.
It was a yo-yo week for sure. I mean, I'm sure that by the time Thursday was done, people thought, well, what a bummer week this is. And then we got Friday up 187 points on the Dow, and basically, regained everything that had been lost the previous day, and actually finished the week with a close. And people are following the news on this. Certainly, I think they saw that the Eurozone officials in their summit meeting came up with some indication, that they were going to, in some agreement with, some measures on it that said if people don't follow along with this, that there are some penalties in place. And because of that, the markets like that because it had obviously some, not only the direction that they're looking for in terms of how the countries were going to come over and be much more strict on expenditures, very frankly, and controlling what they were going to be able to spend money on, how far they were going to be able to extend themselves. But the thing is that most of these countries now have to go back and get, the official approval from their governments to do this. And I would not be a bit surprised if we got more volatility here in, the next weeks. And of course, the thing in December you got to be careful of is because you're in a holiday period of time, the trading gets thin. What that means is that it's, if you have light trading, then the market can swing one way or the other a little bit easier. It's not balanced out with as many traders. And so that's a little bit of a risk that we could get more volatility ahead. And also, when people start to realize this deal isn't done, sometimes I think Wall Street needs to do their homework a little bit more. And frankly, along that lines is to say, this is what percentage of agreement are we at? And I would say right now, at best, it's like 20% completed. So there's a lot left to go, which means a lot of room for speculation, which means, of course, a lot of room for volatility.
Scott, I've got a question for you. All that current activity and economic trends, market trends, more importantly, what kind of folks, when you're working with them, who really cares about that short time frame of information?
Right, and it's interesting because I think a lot of people care about it from the standpoint of, hey, what's going on? They just don't like the ambiguity of it. Very few people really, when you ask them about their goals, care about it much at all because it's choppy water for a period of time, but what's most important is that people identify what it is they want and when they want it. So, identifying or trying to really set the direction for when they're going to retire or when they're going to send a child through college. That's the most important time frame for most people, not what's going on necessarily in the market.
So similar to the name of your show, it's strategy first, not the day-to-day market trend.
That's exactly it. It is about getting the strategy first. Having said that, is that if you were concerned about the kind of volatility that we're having, and I think there is some reason to be concerned, then it wouldn't be a bad idea within your strategy to put in place some defense.
Sure.
You know, because a lot of people, and I find this, I was with some clients yesterday, and they had not taken the time to examine their 401ks for over a year, and here they are in enrollment period, and they had some very large gaps. As you know, Alex, that we work a lot with model portfolio theory, and model portfolio theory really helps us say, well, do you have each of the necessary areas covered? So, you know, do you have something in mid-cap, small-cap, value, growth, international, you know, different kinds of bonds, short-term, long-term, mid-term, all these things, you know, and our listeners right now are going, oh, man, you know, I can't possibly do this. And you know, in fact, that's why they choose, you know, to partner with us, is to get those things done. And by the way, we do have Alex Gonzalez
I guess we should probably introduce him, shouldn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And Alex, we're delighted to have you here. And, of course, our topic today is special needs. And so this is today's discussion is going to be really pertinent to, I think, most of our families, because most of our listeners either have a special needs person in their family, or you know, directly a family member or an indirect family member. So grandmas and grandpas, aunts and uncles. You know, listen up today, because we're going to have some special offer for our listeners, as well as what I consider to be really great information. So, Alex, thank you for joining us here today. And you know, you've been on the show before, and I always say we bring you back by popular demand, you know, frankly, because I think you're not only a wealth of information, you're a wealth of experience relative to special needs. So, you know, tell us a little bit about how you got involved at the special needs area of financial planning.
Sure. Well, thank you both, first of all, for having me again. You let me sneak in the back door here, so that's nice to have me back in. But how did I get involved in this? I'll share a little bit. I did grow up here in the Minneapolis area. Have my wife Simone and my 3 wonderful children. We all live in Bloomington, so it was a long move from Minneapolis to Bloomington. Met my wife at Augsburg. But really what leads me to today is our oldest son, Jake, has high-functioning autism. And there's a spectrum or a range of special needs planning. And that life experience combined with my certified financial planner, financial planning professional experience blends. It's a pretty unique blend of life experience and professional experience that brings me today to be a potential resource for your listeners.
Very good. And you know, one of the things, we'll talk about this in the course of today's show, but they have, just in terms of defining what special needs, needs situations are. I mean, there's a lot of people back in the day when I grew up, which I'm pretty certain that they would have a specific description for today, that in the past all we would say is they're a little odd, you know, very frankly. And now I think that sheds a really different light on things. And I think it makes us hopefully more tolerant, more empathetic, but it also says maybe we need to do some special planning there along the way.
And speaking of which, since our topic is special needs planning, explain what special needs planning is to the people out there maybe don't understand exactly what that means.
Sure. A little perspective. Scott, you had mentioned how many folks are impacted by special needs. According to a recent survey, about 1 in 5 households in the state of Minnesota have a special needs person in their family, whether that's in their direct household or an extended family member. So 20% is a very large number and growing. Special needs, what is that? It's really 2 areas. Some people say, Alex, isn't that a little bit of a narrow focus for your financial planning practice? And really it's not. It is folks that have physical limitations or disabilities and or cognitive issues, such as my son with high-functioning autism. So there is a huge range of folks like that. So back to your question. What is it? Well, it's two different areas. One is a financial, the black and white of the numbers, and some is just life identification. For me as a special needs financial advisor, I walk in the same shoes as a lot of these folks, and I know where some of those life experiences are. So a lot of it is to be a direct similar to any other family household, but there are some specific items that we'll cover a little bit later that are specific to special needs planning.
Okay, so I think you've done a good job, Alex, at giving us a sense of who's affected. So tell us a little bit about what the purpose, when you're doing a special needs plan, what's the purpose of it generally?
Yeah, the purpose is twofold. Number one, mom and dad or the primary caregiver are usually so busy focusing on providing care for that special needs child.
The day-to-day stuff.
The day-to-day stuff, yep. So they tend to forget about their own financial goals, either for them as a couple or them as an individual, and or other children that are typically developing, such as planning for college, their own retirement, things like that. And it's just to get them up to date on their own financial goals, just like any other household.
And how it connects to what this child might need as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because we all have multiple goals, and we can't typically bite those off all at once, so we have to integrate those and use our values to help prioritize what to go after first. So
Right.
some of that special needs planning then integrates that particular component, special needs, with their other goals.
Right.
So the outcome of the special needs piece of their overall planning usually winds up being some legal documentation is one, and then some funding towards some of the special needs that may be there for that adult child.
Okay, so
eventually.
you're talking about a whole different avenue of planning that you might not even open up if you didn't have a special needs child. Some of course, is the same because you want to get the retirement goals met, and
Right.
and most families like yours have got other family members that they have to plan for, like you would in a normal sense.
That's right.
But it's the integration of those two things then. So, one of the things, Alex, if you look over the last 30 years and what has changed is, we're able now today to support in a health perspective people with special needs, and you talked about this wide spectrum, but a lot of people with, fairly severe handicaps are living much, much longer than they were in the past. And so, back 30 years ago, I think a lot of families with someone with a pretty severe kind of disability operated with the assumption that mom and dad were going to outlive that child.
Right.
And that's changed substantially in the last 30 years, hasn't it?
It sure has, yeah.
And so how has that change affected what we do with special needs planning?
That's one of those life experience pieces that I was speaking of earlier, Scott. It's just it's not so much financial planning in terms of the black and white numbers that you and I are used to working with. It's also some of those big decisions that we have to make as a family member, because mom and dad may not outlive their special needs adult family member. So that means they have to make some pretty big challenging decisions about who that successor advocate is going to be. Who's going to advocate for their child is in place of them. Now,
Right.
it's probably nobody's going to be at that same level as mom and dad in terms of advocacy.
Right.
But we'd much rather have mom and dad decide than the state of Minnesota or somebody else.
Okay, so help me with this. You use the term advocate, and I thought you were going to say caregiver, but they're different.
Different, but can be the same.
Can be the same.
Yes.
Okay. So you're saying basically on the one hand, the advocate, who's going to stand up for this person? Who's going to make sure things are right? Am I getting that right in
Correct.
terms of advocate? But
Yeah.
and obviously we know what a caregiver is, a person who provides for their day-to-day needs.
And usually it's mom and dad are the caregivers and the advocate. But sometimes when you get to that next generation down, maybe it's going to be a sibling that'll be primarily an advocate while the special needs adult child is receiving services for some of that care.
Very good. Okay, good. Well, we've got a lot more coming up on special needs. We're going to dive into the kind of the deep part of what might be done from the financial planning standpoint of special needs and define it a little bit further. So listeners, hang on here. We've got some really good stuff. If you are a mom, a dad, a grandma, a grandpa, and right immediately after our break, we've got our free offer. We've had some really great free offers here this month of December, and we've got a really good one today. So hang on, because right after this break, we're going to tell you about what you can do if you call in.
More financial strategies with Scott Wardell right after this.
How would your financial life improve if you changed just one thing? Avoid ATM fees, make your gifts rather than buy them, protect yourself from identity theft, save more for your family's future. The list goes on. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing. Think about your finances, your lifestyle, your wants versus your needs. What one thing can you change today and see the impact tomorrow? Perhaps your family will save all your change for a month and donate it to charity. Maybe you'll finally write a will. Whether you choose to start simple or take a big step, that one thing can really make a difference. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your financial life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing.
And we're back with Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. Alex Gonzalez, our guest this week, talking about financial or special needs planning. We'll be talking more about that, but we got to get our deal of the day first, and it's a really nice one. We've been having, I don't know what you've been doing there, but you've gotten some pretty nice deals, and it continues this week.
And you know, Thrivent has been wonderful in supporting this and helping us pay to get these educational offers out to folks. And so once again this week, we have a really great book that for our callers. And so let me give you the number to start with. You can write the number down now. Describe the book just a little bit here, but the number is 1-855-346-4332. And if you call that and leave your name, address, and a phone number, and we have had some difficulties with the spelling of names, and consequently already last week we got 2 of the books back in the mail because we didn't get it quite right. So please leave us a phone number as well so that we can call and make sure and verify that we've got both the address and the name right as we're sending these out. But the book is called The Special Needs Guide, How to Prepare for Every Stage in Your Child's Life, is by John Natawarny and Cynthia Haddock. And, you know, if you go on to Amazon.com, this is $19.77. And because of the
not that you were checking or anything.
Right, not that I was checking. But because of the great support that Thrivent is giving us here on the show, we're able to send this out free to everybody who calls that number. So, again, if you have a child, a grandchild, a niece, a nephew, if you've got a neighbor that you're really interested in, if there's somebody in your congregation. As a matter of fact, churches, if you think this is a good reference guide for you to have in your church library, we'd be more than happy. Now, I will tell you this, although we have been pretty generous about all of this, that we're going to limit it to the first 50 callers. Because we still have a budget we have to operate within. Sure. So, but the first 50 callers, last week for our offer, I said that we were going to limit to the first 50 callers, and you know how many calls we got? 49. So people somehow, the magic worked, and people took us right up to the limit. So that should be enough for everybody who is listening today that would like to have a free copy of the Special Needs Guide, How to Prepare for Every Stage in Your Child's Life.
And as Alex said earlier, 1 out of 5 families deal with it, so you definitely know a lot of people are dealing with it.
Exactly.
This.
So what that means, when Alex says 1 out of 5 families, I immediately look around my neighborhood and I say, wow, that's exactly right in my neighborhood. It's one, when I take a look at the 20 households in the neighborhood, that math works perfectly in my neighborhood, which means that, if you're concerned about, the kid next door and you say, hey, they might not be listening right now, but I'd like to get this book for them, go ahead and give us a call. So at any rate, Alex, we're talking special needs planning. Who should consider this? Who do you think is the the target families to be thinking about this?
Yeah, it's really the families with a special needs child, whether they're a minor or an adult. That's primarily who should do that. Grandparents as well, or at least grandparents need to be made aware of some of that planning.
And they could put grandparents. Let's talk about that for just a second. They can put a part of their financial plan together to say, and I've had a lot of grandparents that have said this along the way that said, okay, here's our general plan, but we have a specific thing that we think we need to do here. And then that starts the special needs conversation because they have somebody within that relationship that they say we'd really like to help them out.
Yeah, and it's really the purpose of that. Of course, it could be extended family, friends, etc. But it's most typically, like we've experienced in our planning practices, Scott, it's grandma, grandpa that want to share some of their blessings with their family, which is wonderful. What we really want to make sure is that some of those lifetime gifts by grandma, grandpa, or other family members, or upon their passing, don't go directly to that special needs child.
Right. Exactly. So if we've nailed the who, let's talk about the when. When should somebody start a special needs plan?
Well, in general, it's just sooner rather than later. Hopefully, before any asset transfers have happened to that special needs person directly. And if that's already happened, then that's okay. We just keep moving forward. But it's really what the whole purpose is to try to protect some of the benefits that special needs person may be receiving from government sources, because there is an asset test.
Okay.
So we want that to go to what's called a supplemental or special needs trust.
Okay, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that, coming up here. But as you think about that in terms of getting it started, Alex, you and I both know that Thrivent has given some definition to the stages of people's financial life, starting out with, at the very, very basic or lowest level, frankly, is the strugglers, people who are struggling, and they are working on each moment, each day. Their time horizon is just one day at a time.
Sure.
Up from the strugglers, of course, you've got those that are surviving. And surviving people, we say, are really living their life a paycheck to paycheck. So their time horizon is 2 weeks.
Sure.
From there, you go to stable. Now, it's people when they go from that step, by the way, up to stable, from struggling to stable, that's a real sense of relief, because now the ship is floating, and they often can look out a year at a time. And then from stable, the next S in our 5 S's is secure.
Sure.
Okay, so now they feel like they've got some insulation, so even when bad things happen, they've got some cash reserve, and they've got the ability then to take a hit here or there, whether it's a financial hit or other hit, and still be okay. And then the final S in our 5 S's is, of course, surplus. The surplus is where they say, I'm not only secure, I've got my retirement pretty well set, but I can see now into the long future that I won't go through all of this money or all of my wealth, and now I might be able to start making some other decisions about it. So when we talk about when someone should take on the task of establishing a special needs plan, in that range, where would you think? Is there a particular spot where you say, what, once you get to secure, or what would you think?
Well, some of it's just a pure practical nature. If somebody's just surviving, Scott, then they may not be able to have another expense of some of the legal work that is necessary to create a supplemental needs trust.
Right.
And that's just a real world item there. But maybe it's grandma and grandpa that have got to that point of surplus and sharing.
Sure.
I would add another sub-S to that,
right.
Of sharing those blessings. Maybe grandma and grandpa create that supplemental needs trust for that special needs grandchild.
Okay, so within the family, kind of the family ladder, you often have exactly what you're describing. There might be somebody that is struggling. And frankly, you know this because people who have, especially those who are developmentally disabled and have high needs, even if the family is doing okay financially, they can be really struggling through the whole, or even on the surviving standpoint, just barely surviving relative to their own personal capacity to take care of this.
I would completely agree. I see that fairly often as just the sheer amount of time for providing care and that advocacy. They may be fine financially, but just emotionally or just time-wise, they are very limited. And that's one of the limitations to some of the planning that we do. People just are so busy with life that sometimes they don't take the time to meet with somebody like you or I.
Right.
And that's what we really need to try to encourage people to carve out some time to think about themselves.
When you think of most people pay way too little attention. This is, of course, a financial planning bias, right?
Yes.
We want them to say, don't watch the football game. Do
Hey,
your financial plan.
some people like watching football, huh? Hey, lay off me.
Right, exactly. So, but, we started with the limitations on special needs planning. Anything else, Alex, that you would add to that list?
The time is one of the things that I've mentioned that some of my special needs clients have limitations with. They also tend to take that next step of time limitation of actually executing the legal work.
Right.
And it does take some time for that, but it's important. It doesn't have to be all done at once. And somebody like myself, in terms of a special needs financial advisor, we can help them hold their hand through that process to make sure that we get that done.
Well, and you also talked about the financial limitations as well, because special needs planning isn't free, and
Right.
And if they're strapped on both time and on the money, they might not be able to put together the core architecture. But I think that even if they're not quite ready yet, I'm sure you'd be happy to sit down and meet with them and describe some architecture. And for those that are ready, of course, then you can take those steps and get going on it.
Completely agree, Scott. I think that architecture that you're referring to is that important first step about doing some of their planning inside their household and getting their mind wrapped around it.
Right.
And then creating some action steps. If it's 6 months, a year, whatever that may be, at least it's creating that plan, like you're saying, the blueprint.
Right, exactly. And I think about the architecture a lot because there's a lot of folks that don't come to us until their architecture, or at least part of their finances, that being their basic financial position, is already fairly sound. And I've been working now, gosh, it's probably been for the last, I hate to say it, it's probably 2 years I've been working on my book, Retiring in Turbulent Times. I still haven't got the thing done, but I'm making progress. It's going to be a good book, Adam. I mean, it takes time to do these things.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Got to get all those stories in there.
Right, and that is what the book is mostly made up of, is real life stories instead of, obviously we use the basic tenets of financial planning in the book, but it is not one of these books that's going to be all about theory. It's going to be about here's how it really, really works. Well, I've learned a few things as I was putting this book together, because I've got help on the writing of this book from a friend of mine, Brian Lampert, and so we brought back in some people that were stories in the books. I had done the interview, and then Brian said, I want to meet them myself, Scott, if you don't mind, to kind of get the flavor, so as I'm helping you write it, I get a little bit more of the personality part of this. And so we brought some folks back in, and Brian asked a couple questions that I didn't ask. And one was, relative to the financial architecture, this very thing you're talking about. And he, as people were describing their stories and saying, gosh, we really got ourselves in this terrible mess, and it was full of credit card debt, etc. And he said, well, why did you take so long to call a financial advisor and get some direction along the way? And the answer has been very, very common. They said, we're embarrassed and we're ashamed. And, so in general financial planning, people put it off. They need to get the architecture in place. Even from Brian's standpoint, which is more of a writing standpoint than a financial planning or architecture standpoint, he could see this didn't make any sense to wait. So with special needs, I believe it's the same.
Completely
Take the
agree.
time,
Yep.
get the architecture, get the vision of what it could be, even if you don't today have all the resources you need to put it together.
Yep. First initial meeting with us is complimentary.
Yep. And then if you do have the resources to put it together, then by George, let's really take some action, because people put this off year after year, and we're coming up to the end of the year. So.
Yep.
Okay, well, we got a lot more coming for you on special needs with Alex Gonzalez here, so hang on and listen up tight, because we've got a great offer for you today for those that didn't get it in the first 15 minutes. We're going to give it to you right after the break.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
Nearly 3 million members look to Thrivent Financial for Lutherans to help them achieve their financial goal. Nearly 3 million people know that Thrivent Financial is committed to excellence in financial services and caring for others. Get to know Thrivent Financial and the quality of products and services they can offer you. In Minnesota, you have a host of representatives to help you with your financial needs. Contact your local Thrivent representatives Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731 or call 1-855-346-4332. Registered representatives for securities offered through Thrivent Investment Management Incorporated, member FINRA and SIPC.
We're back here on Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. Our guest this week, Alex Gonzalez. But before we're talking about special needs planning, we'll get back to that. But first, we got to get the deal of the day, and it's another great one. We've been doing this really, well, it's almost been a month full of really great deals we've had, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely we have. I really think that part of our goal at Thrivent is to really help educate the public on a lot of different financial issues, and this is a really important one when we're talking about special needs planning. So here's the phone number. If you folks have got a pen and can write this down, if you call in, we're going to give you a free copy of the Special Needs Guide, How to Prepare for Every Stage in Your Child's Life. And it's got a lot of great chapters, and it helps you through the very kinds of things that we are talking about here today. So, when do you need a special needs trust is one of the things that addresses it. What has to go into the trust? What kind of other financial support do you need to design? This is a really good book, and it'll help you with the language. So when you meet with someone like Alex, and one of the things that our listeners probably need to know, and that is that when our core of financial representatives that are out there have a situation like this, Thrivent's got a team that they can call on, and your financial planner, your financial representative with Thrivent can call up and say, Alex, I really need you to drive over to New Ulm today or wherever it happens to be, and say, I need you to help me with this particular case with your specialty. That's the team associated with Thrivent. So here's the number. It is 1-855-346-4332. And again, the book is The Special Needs Guide, How to Prepare for Every Stage in Your Child's Life. If you go to Amazon.com, or if you're near a computer right now, I think you're going to find that for about $19.77. We're going to give it to you for free today just for calling in. So, and Alex, I really appreciate your being here today and talking to us about special needs planning, because it's a really important part of many families' financial plan.
Sure is. Thank you again for having me.
Well, we are talking about special planning. We're talking about limitations before. Are there any, like train wrecks or derailments that people need to be considering, Alex?
Yeah, there sure are, and it's quite often similar to most households that are out there. It's similar issues if somebody were to pass away prematurely, meaning the primary care provider or that advocate, mom or dad. If somebody passes away, that's an income stream. That's health insurance benefits that cover that special needs child if they're a minor. There are big things along those lines. Same thing with that care provider or advocate parent if they become sick or hurt themselves, if they become disabled, not able to work, same type of issue. Or an extended period of unemployment, that emergency reserve that you spoke of earlier, Scott. Those are important things at the bottom of your financial planning pyramid that are the foundation that people need to make sure that are covered.
And we saw some of that this week with Schwann's company was announcing that they were laying some people off down in Marshall and also in Bloomington as well. So that's something that happens to a lot of people these days.
Right, exactly. I was meeting with a client yesterday afternoon, and I won't name the company, but they were saying that there were some layoffs announced at their company, and I asked my client, about what was it, people with low seniority, or who was it that got laid off? And he said, no, one of the guys that got laid off has spent 40 years and was a year and a half away from retirement. And he just got his pink slip and escorted to the door today. So this is part when we go back to core financial planning, is making sure that your financial position is sound all the time. So people get a little complacent at times to say, well, things are rolling along pretty well, and I don't, and then they let that cash reserve maybe slip down a little bit lower than it needs to be, or they take on too much credit card debt. And I got to tell you, don't ever let that happen, because when you do, you might have, you might be that guy with 40 years seniority. And
Well, one of the other things, I'm going to change the direction just a little bit. We haven't talked about this in the past, Scott, but the other derailer is just lack of knowledge. For example, when a child reaches age of majority, there's a pretty big switch that happens there. Meaning, for example, if they own assets like an UTMA account, UTMA or UGMA, that all of a sudden is an asset of theirs, and it's part of that special needs planning.
Okay, age of majority. What does that mean? What's the difference between age of majority and just anything else?
It's 18.
Okay, I wanted to make sure. I didn't know for sure if there was a different age or not.
In the state of Minnesota, it's when they're age 18, they're considered an adult, and then they have direct ownership instead of like parental ownership and different things.
And part of that is health insurance. So if that child is not going to be a full-time college student, which is feasible in special needs community, then there are health insurance issues, because then they are no longer possibly going to be covered under mom or dad's group health insurance. So then what do they do? Well, Medicare is part of that planning.
Okay.
Right, exactly. And of course, a lot of the health insurance rules have changed now so that you can cover people that are older than 18. So you have to be really kind of tuned into your own plan and the own facets of that plan. So Alex, how about tax considerations? Are there special tax considerations for special needs planning that we got to be thinking about as well?
Yes, there are. When we get back to that supplemental needs trust or special needs trust, we really need to put careful consideration in terms of any lifetime gifts, if particularly like grandma or grandpa want to gift to that.
Sure.
There are certain assets that are better for gifting to that trust during their lifetime.
Okay. And that are better to give because they don't create a tax implication on the transfer, or
both.
Yes.
Both. We need to think about the taxes that would be generated from gifting that. So, for example, if grandma and grandpa want to gift an IRA account to the trust, so that's going to essentially be cashing it all out in that year of distribution. So if they want to gift $20,000, for example, to a supplemental needs trust, grandma and grandpa have to realize $20,000 of income and then gift it as cash, essentially.
Whereas if they gave something outside of the qualified plan, the 401k, the IRA, then they could give it either as cash, but then they might have to sell it. So if it's an appreciated asset, they'd have capital gains.
Correct.
Or if they have regular cash, of course, there's no gifting problem there, other than they have to stay within the limitations of gifting.
Right.
Okay.
Which is an estate tax, and this is
where it gets really complicated.
This is where it gets complicated, and that's where it helps to have a professional, particularly a CFP, like Scott or myself, to help integrate all of those pieces. Another piece of that is if there's a certain investment type of asset that generates a lot of income inside that trust, so once it's held inside the trust, trusts pay a higher income tax bracket. The brackets are much more condensed.
Compressed, exactly, yeah.
And
you get to a very high tax bracket inside of a trust very, very quickly because they don't have the regular standard deductions and the things that individuals have.
Correct, yeah. So that's where it's really important to have somebody, a financial advisor that can help with all of those strategies. Tax advisors, legal advisors, and a financial advisor.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a big role that we play in this, we like to quarterback this, frankly, but we like to put in geez, is that all it takes to make you happy? Is to say the word quarterback?
Football, sports, anything like that usually gets me smiling.
Your language, okay. Well, yeah, because we know that this can't be done by just one narrow profession, so we have to bring in the accountants and the attorneys into the equation to really make sure everybody's queued up as to what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously we're talking about special needs plan. We're talking earlier on in the show, and we were talking about how people are living longer. Everybody, special needs plans, and people living to a longer life. How does special needs planning affect people's retirement planning as well? Because those two kind of go hand in hand, I'd have to imagine.
Very good question. It adds to the complexity of the retirement planning. On top of their normal standard of living, travel, healthcare expenses, and so forth, we need to add a line item to their expenses, which is providing care in one form or another for that special needs adult child. That could be out-of-pocket healthcare expenses. It could be lots of different needs. Maybe it's traveling back and forth to where that person lives, where mom and dad live. It's important for somebody like Scott and I to really do some digging with a client and see what those added expenses are so we can plan for it.
And I would say that it depends upon who we're doing the actual retirement planning for as well. So, for instance, if we're doing the retirement plan for, Grandma and Grandpa for this child that has the special needs, the retirement plan can be really liberating because what we find is that a lot of people really have the desire to help, but they want to make sure that they've got enough for themselves as well. So I was working with a couple who, thought, "Boy, we could really go down the path of doing some gifting here," but they said, well, they didn't put it in exactly these words, but they didn't want to be made the fool to say,
Sure.
"Gosh, we did all this gifting and now we're strapped."
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big issue for a lot of people. They say, "Hey, you know what? If I'm 74 years old and I'm likely to live another 20 years, that sounds like that might take a lot of money."
Mm-hmm.
So it's our job then to figure out, well, based on their cash flow. And I say, when you're retired, cash flow is king. You got to figure out how to match up the right income stream, the right assets that flow into that income stream to create that cash flow, so that you've got enough for yourself, and then it can be super liberating.
And as a financial advisor, Scott, isn't it so fun to take somebody that might have a little bit of a mindset of scarcity and wondering, gosh, am I going to have enough to live that 20, 25 years in retirement, to that sense of abundancy where, wow,
Right.
we do have enough.
I was stress testing a retirement income plan for a couple, and they honestly did not know whether they had enough money to do any gifting. And so I started throwing different numbers at it. I took all of their cash flow needs, all of their day-to-day needs, all of their travel needs,
Mm-hmm.
all of the estimations of potentially increased income taxes. And, I just couldn't break their model in the normal sense. So I said, well, let's throw another $10,000 of gifting expense on here and see if your model can take the stress. Didn't touch it. So I threw another $20,000 at it. Didn't touch it.
Wow.
I didn't get any what we call separation between best case, worst case, and average case. I didn't get any separation on that until I threw $40,000 a year. Now, when I went back to them and showed them their financial plan had that much strength that under the stress test, then, of course, they felt liberated, as I just described earlier, in starting to do a lot of gifting. Now, are they going to go up to the $40,000 that creates the stress on their retirement plan? Absolutely not. But are they comfortable in that range of $10,000? Absolutely they are.
And I think when we come back, we should hopefully use that segue of gifting to supplemental needs trusts and how to do that effectively.
That sounds great. We've got Alex Gonzalez on with us today. We're talking about special needs planning. And right after the break again, I'm going to give you that phone number and the name of that book that you can get by calling in today. So, Alex, thanks again for being with us here. And we're looking forward to the next 15 minutes where we're going to really talk about some of the investment selection needs of special needs funding.
Perfect.
Well, you're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
How would your financial life improve if you changed just one thing? Avoid ATM fees, make your gifts rather than buy them, protect yourself from identity theft, save more for your family's future. The list goes on. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing. Think about your finances, your lifestyle, your wants versus your needs. What one thing can you change today and see the impact tomorrow? Perhaps your family will save all your change for a month and donate it to charity. Maybe you'll finally write a will. Whether you choose to start simple or take a big step, that one thing can really make a difference. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your financial life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing.
Scott Wardell.
Did you forget who the show was with there for
I had
a moment?
I had a second.
Half a second there.
Where's he going here?
Yeah, you ever have those times where you start talking, you can't remember what you were saying at the beginning of it, and you're just mid. Maybe that just happens to me. I don't know if that ever happens to you, Scott, but
I think it happens to everyone. Like, where am I going here? Absolutely.
I had a point I was going to say, and now I don't know where I'm going. But there's a deal of the day, right?
Yeah, there's the deal of the day.
Let's go to that. I'm just going to step away now.
That sounds good. And the deal of the day today, because our topic is special needs planning, is this guide, and it's called the Special Needs Guide: How to Prepare for every stage in your child's life. And it's on Amazon.com for pretty close to $20. They always give me a funny look when I say 1977, but that's what it is. Got to be exact, I guess. At any rate, so if you call this number 1-855-346-4332 and leave your name and your address and a phone number so we can call back and verify, then we'll send that out to the first, and I think we're going to have enough books for every single caller here today. I do, because we're going to do up to 50 of these books that we're going to mail out to people. I got to protect ourselves somehow in case we get 100 calls, but we should be able to have enough for everybody that calls in. So if you're a family member, if you are a brother or sister of someone who has special needs, if you are a mom or a dad, if you're an aunt or an uncle and you've always wondered, I wonder if I should participate in helping out my niece or my nephew. Today, give us a call and we will send that book out to you. And one other thing, by the way, we have, and we've talked about in the past, our website where you can go to thrivent.com/find an event. There's something else that you can do, and we offered this up last week and people responded very positively. If you're in any of the listening communities and you say, I think it would be great to bring a special needs group together and have a seminar on special needs planning, and I'm sure that the financial representative in your area, along with Alex Gonzalez, who's on the air here, can arrange sometime in the next year to have that seminar given. So, have expertise, will travel.
You betcha. You betcha. And that is part of how I like to make a difference in the community, as well as to help people in the special needs community. That's one way is educating the community.
Right. So you can do that on thrivent.com/find an event. If it doesn't make sense on that website to request the event, then just go back to that toll-free number, 1-855-346-4332, and leave us a message, and we will hook you up with Alex so that we can get a workshop on special needs planning in your community.
Great.
Okay?
Yep.
Good. So let's see, we were talking right before we left here about grandma, grandpa, aunts, and uncles, and how they might really help with the special needs plan. And do you see some of that, Alex?
I definitely do. I mentioned a scenario earlier where maybe grandma or grandpa could create that supplemental needs trust if mom and dad can't quite get things rolling to get that done. That's one way. The most common way that I see is gifting assets to that trust instead of directly to the special needs individual, because that could interrupt some government benefits that they may be receiving.
Right, and let's really be clear about why we want to do this, is that when someone is getting government benefits and when the dollars are not managed or put into the trust appropriately, then what the dollars that people set aside for that special needs person end up being used for customary care, correct?
Correct.
And if, in fact, you do the right kind of planning and set up the right kind of special needs trust, the dollars that you set aside are for extra stuff. So they still get the core benefits that they might be getting from a government agency, right? But then they're able to have extra stuff available to them because of the special needs trust.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that is the name behind it, Supplemental Needs Trust. It's for their supplemental needs. And that usually, the trustee decides that, meaning maybe that's mom and dad or a sibling, whoever that may be, that decides what those supplemental needs are. Going to a movie once a week, pizza twice a month, whatever that may be.
Making their life just a little bit better.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, very good.
Okay, so we're talking about this process. What is the process, and how does someone get this started with the special needs?
You know, the first step is to look at meeting with a special needs financial advisor or legal advisor that has specific experience in special needs planning. Because when it gets time to drafting that document, one word or one phrase can really throw off that planning. So it's really that three-legged stool that I've referred to in the past, a special needs financial advisor, a legal advisor, and a tax advisor, because there are implications that we've mentioned throughout all of this discussion. Review your financial goals, concerns, just as we had mentioned before, retirement, emergency reserves, some of that foundation of the financial planning pyramid. And that it needs to be, the special needs planning needs to be integrated with all those and help you prioritize those.
So basically, pick up the phone, ask for an appointment, get the free consultation, and you'll help them lay out the map. You and in conjunction probably with their existing financial advisor, or if they've not established a relationship, you know, they can establish a relationship in their community, in our entire listening area here. They can talk to one of their thriving people there, and then that person can bring you in and say, hey, you know what, I want that core expertise that I heard on Saturday on the radio as well.
100% correct. Yep, you got it.
Fantastic. So let's talk for just a minute about this considerations for investment selection for a special need, for any kind of special needs funding.
Yeah, it's very similar to traditional investment advice, Scott, that you might give for any other household. It really gets down to timeline horizon of spending the money.
Right.
We do need to be tax sensitive, though, so if assets are inside of the trust, we need to make sure it's not assets that are generating a lot of income. So what does that mean? So it means an asset that generates a lot of interest income or dividend that would be taxable to the trust.
Okay, because of that compressed tax bracket.
Because of that compressed tax bracket, correct. If it's going to be an asset that's going to be spent fairly quickly, that means it needs to be a very stable type of investment, meaning it can't be in the market with lots of ups and downs and gyrations like we're speaking about over the last week or two.
So as we say when we're doing retirement plan, fill up your income bucket, because the growth bucket, and you're going to need, the other part is, of course, you still need some for growth, because these folks, you know,
that's right.
Whoever this individual is you're planning for could live a long time, so you still have to have some growth too.
Exactly. So let's clarify very briefly, because you just mentioned income bucket, which is great, and then Alex just said, well, wait a minute, don't generate income.
Yeah.
Income bucket means safe, stable assets that you're going to spend down in the next 2 to 3 years. Okay.
And there's no reason you can't use tax-exempt bonds inside the trust either.
That is correct. Yeah. You know, you're talking about savings, money market, CDs, tax-exempt municipal bond funds, etc., for that short-term needs. And then there's that growth bucket that Scott was talking about that we do need in the market. And what's good about that growth bucket is typically that's invested in some sort of stock, either stock mutual funds, etc., that have more growth, and that's capital gains tax versus income tax.
Right, and of course, the trust needs a trustee. Somebody's got to be responsible to be meeting with the advisor and other people to make sure that it gets adjusted, the same as an individual plan.
That's right. Yep. And that sounds somewhat intimidating to a lot of folks, but it typically is a family member that has an emotional connection to that special needs person. In some households that I've worked with have done a co-trustee, like a bank trust department.
Right, exactly, if they don't want to go there themselves. Yep.
All right. The past couple of weeks we've talked about retirement income planning. Can that process and the tools we've been discussing today be used, or some of the tools that we've discussed with that, be used for special needs planning? Is that possible that we can mix and match these?
And actually we use some of the same tools to get to the fine-tuned points. So Alex and I both use a tool called TRIO, Thrivent Retirement Income Optimizer, and frankly, we use that tool to make sure, as much as possible, it's never, you can never say with absolute certainty that you have enough for retirement, because so many things can happen. I mean, we've seen some of them this last year, and it's created a lot of volatility. But when we have a high degree of predictability from the tool that says, looks like you're going to have more than enough money for yourself, then the ability for you as maybe a grandparent, as we mentioned earlier, you're really very liberated in terms of what you are able to do. But also, as you were talking about, Alex, and you can say a little bit about this, is adding in this extra expense if it happens to be your child and your obligation to work as well.
Yes, there's not a lot for me to add to that, Scott, other than just making sure we have, for example, a line item on your retirement planning lifestyle for care.
And the expenses, because cash flow is king, and we got to account for that expense as we go.
That's really where the heavy work is, identifying what extra expenses for the special needs.
Alex, say just a little bit about how life insurance is used in many special needs plans.
Great point, Scott. I think what I'll do is I'll respond to that in light of a client situation. Client of mine, she's an 80-plus-year-old client. She has a special needs daughter who is about to turn age 65.
Wow.
Okay. So a little bit different scenario. You have to fund a supplemental needs trust before that special needs person turns 65, Medicare age. Okay. Interesting little thing there. So the best asset for my older client, the mom, to give to that supplemental needs trust was life insurance, because the death benefit grows.
Yes.
Cash value grows tax deferred, so that's not taxable to the trust.
Very good.
And when my client passes away, that all goes income tax free to the trust.
Okay. Wow. That's a great little strategy. We're not sure if it'll work absolutely for everyone, because there might be some limitations, but something definitely to pursue.
Right.
So one more time, I'm going to say thanks, Alex, and I want to give people the phone number to get a copy of this free book, The Special Needs Guide, How to Prepare for Every Stage in Your Child's Life. It is 1-855-346-4332. Give us a call, and we're happy to help. Thank you again, Alex.
Thank you.
That'll do it for Financial Strategies for this week.
We hope you've enjoyed the past hour of Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. While various products may be discussed during the course of this program, please note that these discussions are intended only to educate you about financial topics. They are broad in scope and do not consider your individual personal financial situation. You should work with a qualified financial professional in collaboration with your attorney and tax advisor before implementing any financial decisions which will affect your personal financial situation. Thrivent financial representatives cannot provide legal or tax advice. Your local Thrivent representatives are Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731. Join us again next week for Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell on KMRS Morris.